Maybe you clicked out of curiosity, or maybe, without realizing it, you were looking for a quiet place where words arrive slowly and the pauses are part of the conversation. I wrote this story gently, like stitching together memories, hurts, and small discoveries, hoping that somewhere in it you might see a bit of yourself. If that happens, even for a moment, stay. Listen for as long as you want. And if you feel like it, leave a little sign you were here. It doesn't have to be much. Sometimes a simple "I'm here" in the comments, a quiet share with someone who might need it, or just hitting that subscribe button so we can meet again, is enough to mean everything. Terminal B always smells like burnt coffee and shoe rubber. The PA chimes, the carry-ons click, and people stand a little too close because everyone is trying to be somewhere else. Mom had both our passports in a Navy travel wallet she bought at Target, one of those organizer things with pen loops and a zip pocket. She likes being the responsible one. She likes handing people what they need. She turned to me first. "Put this in your inner pocket and don't keep it in your tote," she said, sliding my passport and boarding pass into my palm. "If you get flustered at security, just breathe, look for TSA pre-check, and stay with your group." Her voice wasn't loud. Mom isn't a yeller in public, but she was precise, and the way she squared her shoulders told everyone around us I was the main event. It felt good, like being the person the day was about. I wasn't dressed like an influencer. Black sweater, clean sneakers, hair in a claw clip. But I'd be lying if I said the moment didn't feel like a coronation. The Paris Fellowship had sent a welcome packet with glossy photos of studios and galleries. My name was on that letterhead. I'd done the essays, the portfolio, the interviews. I'd earned it. And sure, there'd been a lot of family coordination to make it work. Mom's word. But nothing about that felt wrong. Families help the person with the best shot. That's just efficient. Maddie stood half a step behind us, hands tucked under the strap of her canvas backpack. She had on that thrifted green jacket she loves, the one with the stubborn zipper. She was quiet. Maddie's always been quiet in crowds, but there was a tightness to it today. I noticed it, and then, maybe on purpose, I didn't notice it. "We'll sort out your plans when I get back," Mom said to her without turning fully. It was the kind of line you toss out when you're already moving on to the next task. "Let's not complicate this morning." Maddie's mouth ticked at one corner. "It was my itinerary," she said, calm in that unsettling way some people smile when they're not smiling. Then she looked past us at the departures board. "But sure, let's not complicate it." I tucked the passport into my inside pocket, exactly like Mom told me. The nylon of my blazer rasped against the cover. I could feel the corners of the booklet when I pressed my elbow to my ribs. Weight and proof. You don't realize how much a tiny booklet can center you until it's yours, and it means the world will open if you walk the right direction. "Group 2 will board early," Mom said, scanning the email on her phone like she had a stake in the airline's on-time performance. "Gate B12, 10 minutes. A couple at the next stanchion were arguing about whether to check a bag. A baby somewhere was doing that pre-cry whimper. The mundane soundtrack of other people's lives made ours feel sharper, like someone had turned up our volume and turned theirs down. I didn't gloat. I just stood a little taller. If you've ever worked for something and the door finally clicks open, you know that instinct, to take up half an inch more space. Maddie shifted her backpack and said nothing. "That's her tell. She'll talk around you when she's okay. She goes quiet when she's thinking." Back in high school, when a teacher made a snide comment about her not aiming higher, Maddie didn't argue. She went home and taught herself a whole unit's worth of chem labs for fun. She's like that. Still water with an undertow. I know this about her. I just didn't factor it in today. Remember to text when you land, Mom said, softening the way she does when she's 2 breaths from crying. And don't be stubborn about Google Maps. If you get turned around, step inside a store and ask for help. Don't wander. I'll be fine, I said, laughing because I was 26, not 12. I'm not going to hitchhike to Versailles. She squeezed my forearm. I know. A beat. I'm proud of you. That sentence warmed my whole chest. I'd told myself 100 times the fellowship was about craft and network, and a resume line that opens doors. But if I'm honest, a piece of it was about this exact moment. My mother's face, softer than it's been in years, saying I had been right to want something big and to go get it. The PA crackled. Attention passengers on Flight 148 to Paris. This is your first boarding call for Group 1 and families traveling with small children. Group 2, please be ready to line up. There it was. I felt the energy bump inside me like the plane had already pushed back. I zipped my blazer, adjusted the strap of my carry-on, and rolled it forward a few inches, just to feel it move. Congrats, Maddie said, and it wasn't sarcastic. That almost threw me. Thanks, I said, and I meant it. It seemed like the adult thing to say, gracious, uncomplicated. I tapped the edge of my passport with my finger, almost like knocking on wood. Mom hugged me quick, practical, tight. She doesn't linger, she manages transitions like a project manager. Text me when you get to the gate in Paris, and take the shuttle to the student housing your first night, she said. No late-night adventures, please. Got it. I caught my reflection in the window for a second. Not glamorous, just focused. The kind of person who leaves and returns different. Behind me, Maddie's reflection hovered, slightly out of frame, like a continuity error only I would notice. If she was hurt, she kept it on a low shelf where I couldn't reach it, where I didn't have to. They called Group 2. Good timing, I said, smiling at both of them, though my eyes were already on the sign by the jet bridge. I pulled my handle up and felt the little satisfying click. You know that feeling when a thing you've pictured 100 times finally lines up with the real world? My skin buzzed with it. Love you, Mom said. She meant it. People assume favoritism cancels out love. In our house it didn't. It just organized it. Love you, I said back quick, like you do when your throat threatens to make it weird. Maddie didn't step forward for a hug. We don't always hug. She nodded once. That was our handshake. The corners of her eyes did something, narrowed maybe. I filed it under Maddie being Maddie. I turned toward the rope line. The gate agent scanned the first few people, and I lined up behind a guy in a navy suit who was already on his third email of the morning. The scanner beeped, the little green light flashed, and the next person moved. My boarding pass felt warm from my hand. As I took those last steps before the podium, I couldn't stop a wash of certainty from rolling through me. This was how it was supposed to be. Some people are built for orbit. Some people anchor. I don't mean that as an insult. The world needs both. I'd convinced myself somewhere along the way that I was the one who should see more, carry more, be more. That I'd make better use of the chance if I got it. Next, the agent said. I stepped forward. The scanner chirped, friendly and final. The jet bridge air hit cooler than the terminal, metallic, conditioned. I looked back over my shoulder for 1 second, the way you do out of habit. Mom lifted her hand. I lifted mine. Maddie watched me go with that same unreadable half-smile that made teachers nervous and bosses apologetic when they underestimated her. I didn't decode it. I didn't try. My carry-on rolled clean over the seam in the floor where terminal turned to tunnel. If there was a message in my sister's eyes, it didn't reach me before I rounded the corner. The first morning in Paris, the light came in sideways through the narrow dorm window, catching the dust in the air like glitter. I didn't even unpack before walking to the Pont Neuf and snapping the kind of photo that makes you look like you belong there. Within 48 hours, my feed was a neat grid. Eiffel Tower at golden hour, scarf catching the wind, cappuccino foam with my initials stenciled in cocoa powder, a group shot from the fellowship's welcome mixer, everyone holding wine glasses like props in a lifestyle shoot. I was curating the kind of story you tell strangers when you want them to think your life is an uninterrupted upward slope. Mom called on FaceTime during my second brunch. Avocado toast, smoked salmon, champagne. I didn't actually order, but pretended I had. She tilted her phone toward Aunt Janet, who squinted at the screen like the camera might bite. "Look at her," Mom said, half laughing. "Doesn't she just fit right in? Our girl in Paris?" I smiled, adjusted the angle so you could see the street behind me. It felt like playing the lead in a movie you wrote for yourself. Maddie's name didn't come up. I didn't expect it to. The program had networking events built into every week. I wore black dresses and a rotation of blazers, introduced myself with a handshake that said I was here for serious conversations. People asked about my work. I gave them the polished answer I'd rehearsed. I noticed the glances, some warm, some not. At a gallery tour, a woman next to me murmured something in French to her friend. I caught the word prétentieuse. Later, at a rooftop reception, a guy from the London cohort raised his eyebrows after I mentioned the fellowship's travel stipend. "Must be nice," he said, sipping his drink without looking at me again. It was the kind of comment that might have stung if I'd let it. Instead, I filed it under people projecting their own limits and went back to asking someone else about their residency in Berlin. One night, after a reception at an embassy annex, I walked back along the Seine with two other fellows. They talked about missing their partners. I nodded along, not really listening. My mind was on which photo from the night would get the best engagement. By the time I got back to my room, Mom had texted 3 screenshots from my own posts, each with heart emojis. I told myself the occasional cold shoulder was normal. Not everyone likes the person in the spotlight. In high school, when I made captain of the swim team, there were teammates who stopped inviting me to their table. Same pattern, new city. From my little desk by the window, I could see the roofline of the building across the street. I'd open my laptop to plan the next week's events. Museum nights, wine tastings, gallery crawls, while my phone buzzed with likes and comments from home. The story I was telling was working. If anyone here thought otherwise, well, they could scroll past. Jealousy looks the same in every language. It started on a Tuesday morning, the kind where the city felt damp but not rainy, and I was halfway through my second espresso. I opened Instagram without thinking, muscle memory at this point, and there it was. A tag from an account I didn't recognize. The photo was from last year's charity gala in New York, the one I'd RSVP'd for but never made it to because a gallery opening had popped up last minute. The caption, in English and French, read, "When someone commits to raising funds for sick kids and ghosts you for a rooftop party, you remember it." There was no mention of my name in the text, but I was right there in the photo. Front row, volunteer badge around my neck. The tag linked directly to my profile. For a second, my stomach dipped the way it does when you miss a step in the dark. Then I shook it off. Old news. One sour person trying to stay relevant. My followers wouldn't care. Half of them wouldn't even click through. The internet's full of petty. I didn't like or comment. I just muted the account and went back to scrolling. That afternoon, I had a lunch planned with Elise, a stylist who'd been talking about collaborating on a shoot for an indie fashion mag. She texted an hour before. "Hey, something came up. Rain check? No winky face, no suggestion for a new date. Just flat. When I saw her the next evening at a panel discussion, she smiled like she'd just remembered who I was, but her eyes skipped over mine too quickly. That's when I noticed she didn't repost the group photo we took after the panel, even though she'd been tagged. I told myself not to read into it. People get busy, the industry is flaky, and if there was some whisper about me, well, I'd been here before. Back in high school, when someone spread a rumor I'd skipped out on a fundraiser, I'd managed to talk my way back into the good graces of the PTA president in under a week. Same playbook here. Stay visible, keep producing good content, give people more to talk about than one old mistake. So, I booked myself solid for the next 10 days. Gallery tours, wine nights, 2 charity mixers. Irony noted but ignored. If there was a crack in the glass, I'd cover it with fresh paint. I had no reason to think the photo was the first drop in a storm, and I definitely didn't think about Maddie when I closed the app. By Friday, the feed I'd been curating so carefully felt like someone else had gotten the keys. It wasn't just that one post anymore. It was 5, then 12, then I lost count. A post from a guy in Chicago about how I'd promised to speak at his nonprofit's youth art event, then vanished the day before. A woman in Berlin with screenshots of me confirming a volunteer slot at a charity auction, followed by a photo of me at a cocktail bar that same night. A grad student from LA who claimed I'd used her contacts to get into a private exhibition and then ghosted her afterward. Each one came with receipts, literal receipts, emails, text screenshots, even tagged photos from other people's accounts. I recognized the situations, but the way they were framed made them look so much worse. Out of context, I was a flake, an opportunist. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dorm, scrolling faster than I could process, a knot forming under my sternum. The likes on my last Eiffel Tower post had stalled. Comments were turning sideways, half of them still heart emojis, the other half cryptic. Not surprised. Yikes. This you? I hit the call button for Mom before I could talk myself out of it. I can't. My account's tied up right now, remember? You said you'd help if... Lily. She sighed. We don't have it. Not right now. Things are... tight. I stopped pacing. Mom always had a way of making tight sound like temporary inconvenience, but this time her voice wasn't softening. What do you mean, you don't have it? This is my visa we're talking about. I mean exactly that. We can't send you money. For a long moment, all I could hear was my own breathing. My mother, who had fought to get me into this program, who had pulled strings and smoothed over so many rough edges in my life, was telling me she couldn't, or wouldn't, cover a bill that might send me home. When we hung up, the kitchen felt smaller, like the walls had moved in. My phone sat on the counter, the email still open, the deadline in bold. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't just bad optics anymore. Someone, maybe more than one someone, wasn't just attacking my image. They were prying at the screws holding my entire life here together. And the screws were starting to come loose. The unraveling didn't happen in slow motion. It was like someone had yanked the thread and the whole sweater came apart in a week. On Monday, my biggest brand partner, a boutique luggage company, emailed to say they were re-evaluating their influencer collaborations and that my campaign was no longer aligned with our brand values. Translation: we saw the posts, we're out. By Wednesday, 2 more sponsorships vanished. One was a coffee subscription startup, the other a sustainable clothing line that had practically begged me to tag them 2 months ago. Both cited concerns raised by recent public discourse. I told myself I could survive without the money. But then, Thursday morning, The email came from the fellowship coordinator. We regret to inform you that, after careful review, your continued participation in the program is no longer possible. Multiple documented concerns regarding your professional integrity have been brought to our attention. Effective immediately, your fellowship is revoked. You will be expected to vacate student housing by the end of the month. I read it 3 times, each time hoping the words would rearrange into something else. They didn't. The room felt hollow. The hum of the mini fridge, the clink of someone else's dishes in the shared kitchen down the hall, it all felt louder than it should have. I opened my contacts list, staring at names I used to think of as friends. Who could I call? Who would even pick up? My thumb hovered over Elise's number, but I already knew she wouldn't answer. And then, without meaning to, my mind went back to Terminal B, Maddie's face. Not the half-smile I'd filed under Maddie being Maddie, but the way her eyes had seemed to take in more than I wanted them to. The idea landed so cold in my chest, I almost shivered. Could she have done this? I pushed it away, again. It felt absurd. Maddie didn't operate in this world, didn't have the connections. But the thought didn't leave. It just sat there, heavy and silent, like a stranger in the room I couldn't ask to leave. By Friday night, my email was a graveyard of closures and cancellations. My Paris was shrinking, fast, and for the first time since stepping off the plane, I had no idea where I'd be in a month. The cheapest ticket I could find had me leaving at 6:10 a.m. with a 9-hour layover in Boston. No checked bag included, middle seat both legs. 2 weeks earlier, I'd have called that a nightmare itinerary. Now, it was just my exit. The dorm room looked even smaller the night before I left. My suitcase was half zipped, the rest of my life crammed into a carry-on and a tote bag. I didn't say goodbye to anyone in person. There wasn't anyone left to say goodbye to. The gate at Charles de Gaulle was crowded, but I felt invisible. My boarding pass beeped. I found my seat, shoved my bag overhead, and sat. The plane smelled like brewed coffee and recycled air. Somewhere over the Atlantic, I let my mind drift, and that's when it happened. Every little glance, every offhand comment from Maddie started replaying like cut scenes I hadn't connected before. Her half-smile at the airport when Mom handed me the passport. The calm congrats that didn't sound entirely like congratulations. Her face on that FaceTime call while Mom promised to explain things to people. No smirk, no pity, just watching. It hit me in a way that made my throat tighten. Her silence had never been surrender. It had been assessment, and I'd missed it completely. I shifted in my seat, the armrest pressing into my ribs. The hum of the engines made it easy to pretend I was just cold, but the truth was, for the first time in my life, I felt something I'd never associated with Maddie. Not annoyance, not guilt. Fear. Fear that the sister I'd dismissed as harmless had been playing a game I didn't even know I was in. I stared out the window at the clouds, but all I could see was the look in her eyes at Terminal B, steady, measuring, and the creeping thought that maybe, just maybe, she'd already decided how this flight home was going to end for me. It was late afternoon when I finally dragged my carry-on up the driveway. The siding on the house looked a little more faded than I remembered, but the porch light was already on, like it had been expecting me. When I stepped inside, the smell of brewed coffee hit me first. Maddie was at the kitchen table, a half-empty mug in front of her, fingers loosely curled around the handle. She didn't get up. She didn't even tilt her head. She just watched me cross the threshold like she was taking mental notes. "Hey," I said, my voice catching on the second syllable. She nodded once, slow. No smile, no frown. Then she took a sip, Mom came in from the den, TV still murmuring in the background. "There's leftovers in the fridge," she said, almost too quickly. "Long flight? You must be tired." She didn't hug me, she didn't mention Paris, and for the first time in months, there was no phone in her hand, no camera angled toward me for a quick photo to send to relatives. I set my bag by the stairs. The house felt heavier. Not physically, just the air. The sound of the refrigerator cycling on seemed loud enough to notice. We went through the motions that first night. Dinner reheated in the microwave, Mom asking if I needed extra blankets, Maddie clearing her mug and rinsing it without looking at me. No one brought up the fellowship. No one said, "Next time." Days slid into each other. Mom kept busy with errands and TV shows. Maddie kept to her routines, morning coffee, an afternoon walk, sometimes reading in the living room. But she was always there, just enough to be in my peripheral vision. The silence wasn't neutral. It had shape, edges. I caught myself glancing over my shoulder more than once, half expecting to see her watching me. I'd always thought the worst feeling in the world was being talked about behind your back. I was wrong. The worst was knowing someone could be planning the next move against you, and you had no idea when, or if, it would land. The envelope was thick, the kind of cardstock you can feel through the mailbox slot. My name wasn't on it. Mom had left it on the hall table, half covered by a grocery flyer. I picked it up out of reflex, saw the letterhead, and froze. It was from the Hawthorne Arts Foundation, the most prestigious international art scholarship in the country. The one I'd applied to years ago and never even made the shortlist for. The letter was addressed to Maddie. "We are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for the Hawthorne Fellowship in Residence, commencing this fall in Florence, Italy." I read it twice, then a third time, my stomach tightening with each line. It wasn't just that Maddie had gotten it. It was the realization of what that meant. She hadn't just watched my fall from the sidelines. She'd timed it. Every rumor, every receipt, every burned bridge had cleared the field. And now, the last open door I might have run through was hers. I heard the suitcase wheels before I saw her. Maddie came down the hall, travel blazer over one arm, passport wallet in hand. The exact same Navy organizer Mom had used at Terminal B. She didn't even glance at the letter still in my grip. "You're leaving now?" I asked. My voice sounded too thin. She set her carry-on by the door. "Flight's in 3 hours." Mom appeared behind her, fussing with a scarf around Maddie's neck, the way she had for me months ago. But there was no phone out, no pictures being taken. An hour later, I stood in the departure hall, the roles reversed. Maddie scanned her boarding pass, the green light flashing, and rolled her suitcase toward the jet bridge. She turned just once, met my eyes, and for a split second, I thought she might smirk. But she didn't. Her expression was calm, steady, almost peaceful, and I realized that for the first time in my life, I was the one standing still while someone else walked into the future. I stayed there until she disappeared around the corner, the sound of her suitcase wheels fading under the terminal's low hum. It was Terminal B all over again, only this time I was the shadow in the reflection.